My name's Steve, and I'm here to shed a little light on some of my experiences throughout life and what has brought me to be a disciple of Christ now. And the best way for me to tell this story is to start at the beginning. I was born in South Florida, and like any other person, I had a mom and a dad, and I grew up, and somewhere in my early age, my parents were divorced, and I moved to live with my mom, and had a pretty normal childhood. I had some friends, but not wasn't super popular. I wasn't super disliked. But there was always kind of a part of me that felt different. I felt like there was something that always separated me from my fellows, and I could never quite put my finger on it. Growing up in my family, there was never any presence of church. There was never any acknowledgement of God. It was never ever even explained to us as children, or that was even something that existed in life. And growing up through some of the earlier years when I was a teenager, I began to explore the options of what God was, and kind of almost customized it for myself to kind of put together a belief structure that I felt suit me. And it worked. It served me for what I felt I needed as far as what I could obtain from earth, what was tangible, what was material, how I felt in that moment. It was never anything long term. It was never anything endless. It was never anything that I felt like was going to propel me forward. It was more or less in the moment, what I like to call, and what are often referred to as, like, foxhole prayers, like, God help me get an A on this test. God help me get out of trouble. Those were the basis of the prayers. About the time I was about 16 years old, addiction crept its way into my life. And as that happened, I began to see it manifested in my parents, and it was this underlying theme to most of my family. And as a result of that, my mother basically sent me to go live with my father, and pretty much left town. And at that point, I felt the need to reinvent myself because I didn't like the characteristics. I didn't like how I was behaving. There was a definite difference in me when I was sober and when I was not. And I started getting straight A's. I had friends. I had a job. I had pretty much the world open to me. I got a scholarship to go to college. And I felt like everything was beginning to fall into place. And there was no room in my life for anything that I was not in control of. Denial is something that people kind of, for me anyway, develop over time, and it's very thick, and there's a lot of layers to it. I could not ever be stripped of my denial, all of it in one time, because it was a coping mechanism for me. It was how I operated day to day. I dropped out of college because I felt like it was a great idea. Started working construction, started hanging out with people that probably weren't upstanding members of society, and I began to fall back into my old ways. At that point, I was in the complete grips of addiction, but was in complete denial about it. I ended up working for my father at the time, who needed my help desperately. And in that situation, I felt like I could save him from himself, because he was suffering from, severe alcoholism. And in turn, I wound up falling deeper and deeper into my struggle. My mother was hospitalized, my father was hospitalized, and I was quickly following in their footsteps due to addiction. And I wound up at 24 years old sleeping on cardboard behind a building with no one and nothing, not a penny in my pocket, no one to reach to, no one to ask for help. And I was broken. I was ready to die. I remember sitting there trying to figure out which bus I was going to panhandle money for to get on to go to a treatment facility, and not even knowing if they were going to accept me. And at that point, I came to the conclusion that it would just be a lot easier to walk out in front of that bus that morning. And I remember being content with that idea. I was okay with that. And by nothing greater than divine intervention, I had a very subtle, quick moment of clarity. And I remember just laying my head down and saying, God, there's got to be a better way. And my phone rang. And it was a childhood friend that I'd grown up with. And something else besides me motivated me to be honest for the very first time in my life. Truly, honestly, wholeheartedly honest. And I told him everything that I'd been going through and where I was at and what my thoughts and ideas were and pretty much what my plan was. And he drove an hour and a half to pick me up to take me to a facility that could medically detox me. I still wasn't sure about it. I didn't want to go. My addiction was so strong that I was ready to jump out of the car going down 95. But something kept me in that car, and I kept holding on to this glimpse, this idea, this hope that wasn't going to be the end for me, that there was more for me to do. There was something in my life that I began to acknowledge that I had never really quite fully understood. I went into a facility that was a standard 3-day detox, and they could not medically clear me for 7 days. That's how far down I had gone, and my body and everything else was just pretty much giving up. And that was my first taste of AA while I was in that facility. And they came in, and I'll never forget what one of them said was that the only reason why they were there was because we were all just beggars looking for bread. And they had found some bread, and they were there that day to tell me where they had found it. And I remember after that meeting going into my room and getting down on my knees and praying for the very first time in my life, asking God for help. Because at that same time, I realized that there was no way I felt I could possibly do it on my own. I spent a few days in there and my head began to clear, and I went to my counselor that I was assigned to and wholeheartedly begged for something more, because I knew that if they opened those doors and let me out into the world, that I would probably repeat. Even with all the ambition in the world, I would go back exactly to where I came from. And the counselor said to me that I should call over to another treatment facility and talk to them. And I did, and they said that I called that treatment facility. They said they were going to scholarship me for a full treatment, 30 days of treatment. And it was such an amazing experience, because at that point I felt like, after everything that I had done and all the people I had harmed and the hurt I've caused my family, and just, I was not a good person. Why would that gift be given to me? Why do I receive that opportunity? And I could chalk it up to nothing less than God as a blessing, even a miracle in that moment. And I went to that treatment facility and really began to work on myself and began to understand the nature of the disease that I was suffering from, and how it plays a role on me. And I became open to suggestion, and prayer had become a very big part of, I mean, it was a daily occurrence at that point. And I began to see the things happen in my life, inside me, and I could feel a change. And I went on to basically restart my life. I lived at a halfway house for a while, and I remember I got a job as soon as I got out. All these blessings just fell on me one after another, and it was, at that point that I had come to the realization that, the path had already been laid for me by God. I just needed to put one foot in front of the other. I needed to be willing to move forward and to take the opportunity that I was given. Because I believe that, if I, ask God for something, He doesn't just give it to me. It just doesn't show up. I get the opportunity to go after it. And shortly thereafter, I met my wife, Erin, and we began to start a life together. And, belief in God was what I felt was enough for me. And as we started moving forward with our lives, we both began to have some real difficulties with our daughter. And I think, at least I was beginning to suffer from my old behaviors again. I was not active in addiction, but my behavior reflected as though I was. And I remember Erin telling me one day that she was going to go to church. And I was never baptized as a child. The church was probably more, expressed as a bad thing in my household than it was a good thing. So I was just kind of coming from a place of, well, that's good, because I still have this belief in God, and maybe you can find what you need there, was kind of how I felt. And I witnessed this change come over my daughter and Erin, and just, it was night and day difference. The way the Lord started working in their lives was miraculous. And I worked 3 jobs, then 2, and finally got down to 1 job. And I was able to get Sundays available. And then I was able to attend church with her. And we always gone to St. Andrew's. And, the people there were just welcoming, and it was great, but I still felt like something was missing. I could not feel like I was completely a part of. And it was that same never-ending feeling that I've had ever since I can remember. And, with all my overthinking and all of with my analytical mind to try and piece together things, I finally, one day, after some extensive meditation, came to the conclusion that my problem is that there was a hole inside of me. And regardless of what I tried to fill that hole with, whether it be mood and mind altering substances, relationships, money, success, friends, no matter what I tried to fill that with, there was no bottom to that hole. It was, in every essence, a black hole. So I began to think, what could possibly fill a hole that doesn't have a bottom? And it came to me that the only thing that could possibly fill that hole was a source that had no end. And I remember when I had first got out of treatment, I went to church once, and it was said in that church that the only way to get to God is through Jesus. And it was at that point where, very quietly, very subtly, I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And once again, my life propelled itself forward into what it has become today, into something that I could not ever expect to live the life that I live today. After everything that I'd been through, and everything that had happened, I never expected to receive what I have received. And the blessings are almost endless. And in turn, um, being delivered from my addiction and my inability to cope with life and my difficulties in almost everyday situations, I started working at a treatment center where I'm able now to help people that suffered from the same thing that I did. And most of them come in with either not wanting to hear a single word about God, or maybe even being a little bit, half in, half out, on the fence about God. And God has been an absolute crucial part of my recovery. And I feel that it is my duty to try to share that same love and with the people that suffer from the same thing that I do. And it is amazing to watch God intervene in their lives. It's amazing to watch that sense of comfort and peace come over the people that I help, and to watch them leave and go on and start their lives, and to start their faith walk and to move forward. And I feel like it's the least that I could do is to help lead someone else to deliverance after I was delivered. One of the things I always tell the clients is that, they need to forgive themselves for what they did, because they've already been forgiven by God. And who are they to hold that grudge? Once I committed to living a God-conscious life through Jesus Christ, it quickly became apparent to me what it was that was lacking from my previous God-conscious life. Was that service played an absolute huge part of living that life. I will never forget the first time I volunteered at Vacation Bible School, and I was working in the kitchen, and everyone was so polite and so kind and just so happy to have me there. And serving dinner to all those kids that otherwise may not have ever had a chance to, hear the word of Jesus and be ministered to like I was as a child. I felt so alive. I could feel the Spirit moving through me. And it has been since then that I feel so motivated to continue with service. And I do as much as I can to fit that into my life, because it is a crucial part of it. I am training to become a Stephen minister, and in 12-step fellowship, the sobriety date is a big deal. It's almost like your second birthday. And for me, my sobriety date was very dear to my heart. But now my new date is February 7th, 2016, which was the day that I was baptized. And it is, to me, even more important. It's that significant period of time that I have been made new. I am starting a new life, and this is the life I'm going to live. Continuing on to serve people, to serve God, and to allow God to work through me to help others. I'm undergoing Stephen Ministries right now, learning to become a Stephen minister, and I'm extremely excited about that. The fact to be able to help people in their time of need is going to, I know as much as it helps them, it's going to help me. And I'm pursuing a human service degree now to help people, so I can do social work and outreach and be there for people when they're in need, because I feel like it's my calling. I feel like the gifts that God has given me to be patient, understanding, a good listener, empathetic, all these gifts I was given by God. I just never knew it. Now that I am aware and that I've accepted Jesus into my heart, now it's time for me to refine those skills, to continue to work on them. I wouldn't have these abilities if God didn't want me to use them to serve others. And at the end of the day, God's made me a good father, a good husband, a great friend, and a messenger. It's my job to bring light into situations that are dark and to bring hope to the hopeless, and to do it in His name.